October 15, 2018. It was an ordinary evening for most people in the small suburban town of Maplewood. The kind of town where nothing unusual ever seemed to happen. Quiet streets, familiar faces, and a sense of calm that made it feel like nothing could disrupt its peace. But on this night, something was about to shatter the calm. Something that would leave a family broken and an entire community questioning how well they really knew the world around them. Sarah Green was 28 years old, a paralegal with a promising career ahead of her. She had a close-knit group of friends, a loving family, and the kind of future everyone would envy. Ambitious, warm-hearted, and always smiling, Sarah was the type of person who lit up a room. For most of the day, it was just another workday at the office. Sarah wrapped up her work around 6:30 p.m., texting her best friend, Emily, to let her know she would be there shortly for their planned dinner. At 6:47 p.m., Sarah sent a simple text message, "I'll be there in 20 minutes." And then, she disappeared. By 7:30 p.m., Emily, worried by Sarah's absence, sent a few more texts and called, but there was no answer. It wasn't like Sarah to be late without saying something. Her friends knew her as someone dependable, always on time. Minutes turned into hours, but Sarah never showed up. Her phone went silent. The uncertainty began to creep in. The night passed, and with each minute, the concern deepened. No one could have predicted the gravity of what was to come. By the time the sun rose the next morning, Sarah was missing. Her family was thrust into an unimaginable nightmare. For them, it was a start of a journey full of unanswered questions, a journey that still continues. October 15, 2018. Sarah Green's day began like any other. She spent most of it working at a law firm, preparing legal documents, meeting with clients, and handling the usual office tasks. It was a regular Tuesday, one that promised nothing out of the ordinary. By 6:30 p.m., Sarah wrapped up her work, packed her things, and headed out of the office. She'd made plans to meet her best friend, Emily, for dinner. The two of them often got together after a busy workday to unwind, catch up, and talk about everything from work stress to personal matters. At 6:47 p.m., Sarah sent a simple text to Emily, "I'll be there in 20 minutes." It was short, to the point, and typical of the way they communicated. Emily had been waiting at their favorite diner, ready for the night's catch-up session. The message was read, but no reply came. Emily thought nothing of it at first. After all, Sarah had been driving. But as 7:30 p.m. came and went, Emily became concerned. Sarah wasn't answering her phone. No texts, no calls. Emily tried calling several times, but it went straight to voicemail. It wasn't like Sarah to miss a dinner without at least texting an excuse. Feeling a growing sense of unease, Emily called Sarah's phone again. This time, it went unanswered. She sent another message, this one a bit more urgent. "Where are you? We were supposed to meet up." But still, no reply. With each passing minute, Emily's concern grew. This wasn't like Sarah. It was unlike her to leave anyone hanging, especially without letting them know what was going on. She considered texting again, but something told her it wasn't going to help. At 8 p.m., Emily was on edge. It had been over an hour, and Sarah still hadn't shown up. She left the diner, thinking maybe Sarah was caught in traffic or had simply forgotten. But as Emily drove around looking for Sarah's car, she found nothing. Meanwhile, Sarah's car was seen parked in a secluded area just a few miles away from the diner. It was near an old industrial park, a place Sarah wasn't known to frequent. But she wasn't there for long. Emily continued to drive around the area, still hoping to find her friend, but there was no sign of Sarah or her car anywhere. By now, the worrying had turned into dread. This wasn't just a missed dinner. Something wasn't right. By the time Emily returned home, she had left messages and called countless times. No response. That's when she knew she had to do something more. Something wasn't adding up. By midnight, Emily was sitting with Sarah's family, making calls to the local authorities. Sarah's disappearance had officially been reported. The morning of October 16th dawned with no word from Sarah. By then, the authorities had been alerted, and a missing persons report was filed. Detective Michael Adams, an experienced investigator with years of handling missing persons cases, was assigned to the case. His first step, retracing Sarah's last known movements. Sarah's family was frantic, but they remained hopeful. After all, missing persons cases are not always what they seem. Sometimes, people go off the grid for a while and reappear. But as Detective Adams began to dig deeper, he realized this case was different. Detective Adams and his team went to work immediately, beginning with reviewing security footage from the local area. They started by looking at footage from the parking lot of the office building where Sarah had worked. It showed her leaving at exactly 6:30 p.m., getting into her car, and driving off. Up to this point, everything appeared normal. Sarah was on her way to meet her friend. But what happened next raised more questions. For the next 10 minutes, there was no trace of her. According to the security footage, Sarah's car had disappeared from the cameras. The GPS in her car showed she had driven a few miles away from the office, but then, inexplicably, it stopped tracking her. Detective Adams pulled up the car's GPS data. It showed that Sarah's car had stopped moving at 6:40 p.m. At that point, the system went silent. The car's last known location, a remote area outside town, near an old industrial park that no one from Sarah's circle could recall her ever visiting. At first glance, it seemed like an unlikely place for Sarah to be, but this was where things began to take a dark turn. The investigator learned that the industrial park was desolate at night, often used by truckers for overnight parking, and was a known spot for vandalism and other petty crimes. An interview with a truck driver who frequented the area that evening revealed something curious. He claimed to have seen a car parked in the lot, but he didn't recognize the driver. At first, the police thought it might just be another false lead, but they had no choice but to follow up. With the help of canine units, the investigators scoured the area near the industrial park, looking for anything that might point them in the right direction. But despite their efforts, there was no sign of Sarah, no physical evidence, and no witnesses who could provide helpful information. By now, it was clear that Sarah hadn't just gotten lost. Someone had deliberately taken her somewhere. But where? And why? The investigators began to question every possibility from a random abduction to something more personal. Detective Adams then ordered a deeper look into Sarah's background. He wanted to know who she'd interacted with recently, anyone who might have had a motive to harm her. But nothing seemed to raise any red flags. Sarah had no known enemies, no signs of stress at work, and no recent arguments with friends or family. Sarah's mother, Jennifer, was beside herself. She kept asking, "Who would do something like this to my daughter?" Sarah was the most caring person. She would do anything for anyone. She loved people, and people loved her. That's why this makes no sense. The investigation dug deeper into Sarah's personal life, reviewing her social media activity and her recent text messages. There were no messages suggesting she was in any kind of danger. No signs of distress. It appeared she had made plans as usual, without anything hinting at the tragedy that was about to unfold. At 6:47 p.m., Sarah had texted Emily. It was just a brief message, but it was the last known communication she had with anyone. The message was ordinary, the kind of text exchanged between friends. But there was something unsettling about it now, the finality of it. Detective Adams reviewed the data from Sarah's phone, hoping to find a clue, anything that could give him a clearer picture of what happened next. He learned that after Sarah's car had stopped moving, her phone was also turned off. The only trace left behind were a few unanswered text messages from Emily. The Green family, meanwhile, was devastated. They held on to hope that Sarah would be found, but as the investigation progressed, their fears grew. Days turned into weeks, and the case continued to sit in limbo. "I just want to know what happened to my daughter. Where is she? Who did this to her?" As the days passed, the search for Sarah Green grew more desperate. The initial investigation had failed to uncover any solid leads, and with each passing hour, the hope of finding Sarah alive began to fade. But that didn't stop the efforts of the investigators, or Sarah's family, who refused to give up on finding her. The search expanded rapidly as more people joined the effort. Law enforcement, volunteers, and search teams scoured miles of rural areas, searching dense forests, abandoned houses, and even the nearby lakes. They were looking for any sign of Sarah's whereabouts, a piece of clothing, a personal item, anything. Despite the hard work, days turned into weeks, and no clues surfaced. Each new area explored only seemed to reveal more nothingness, further intensifying the uncertainty. Sarah had vanished without a trace. The police reached out to anyone who might have had information. They contacted local businesses, hoping for security footage that could fill in the blanks. They questioned people who might have been in the area the night Sarah disappeared, but no one had seen anything unusual. "We went door to door. We spoke with everyone in the area, but no one had seen anything. It was like she just disappeared off the face of the earth." The Green family made public appeals for information. Every local news outlet carried their desperate pleas. "Help us find Sarah," they said. "If you know anything, please come forward." The community rallied behind them, But still, no new leads emerged. I kept thinking she'd come home any minute. I thought maybe she was out there, confused or hurt, but she'd be okay. But as the days went on, the thought that something worse had happened started creeping in. Despite their growing fear, Sarah's family remained resolute. Every new piece of information was a glimmer of hope, no matter how small. But it wasn't just hope they were clinging to. They were also dealing with frustration. They couldn't understand why no one had seen or heard anything. The biggest challenge we faced at this point was the lack of evidence. No body, no suspects. No one seemed to know anything. It was like Sarah had simply vanished. We were trying to make sense of it, but we didn't have much to go on. Then, a break in the case came when Detective Adams reviewed Sarah's phone records again. This time, he noticed something subtle that had been missed earlier. A series of calls made by Sarah before she went off the grid. Sarah had made several calls to a number in the hours before she disappeared. The number didn't belong to anyone in her immediate circle. It was a landline, registered to an address several miles away from where Sarah had last been seen. Detective Adams and his team followed up on the lead. They arrived at the location, a rundown house on the outskirts of town. The house appeared empty, but they didn't know if it was connected to the case or just another dead end. The investigation took a darker turn when the police discovered that the house was rented by a man named Roger Ford, a local with a history of petty crimes, but no known connection to Sarah. Ford's criminal history was far from impressive. Petty thefts, a few incidents of vandalism, and an assault charge from years earlier. But nothing that screamed dangerous. Yet, something about the timing of the calls seemed too coincidental to ignore. I didn't know him well. He kept to himself mostly. But he had this odd energy about him, like he wasn't quite right. He always seemed a little off. I didn't think much of it until the police started asking questions about him. Ford was questioned by the police, but he denied knowing anything about Sarah or why his phone number had appeared in her call log. He claimed he had been out of town the night she disappeared. But his alibi was weak, and the investigators weren't convinced. Ford's story didn't add up. There were too many inconsistencies, and we couldn't rule him out just yet. We knew he had some involvement, even if he wasn't directly responsible for Sarah's disappearance. The police searched Ford's car, his home, and even his workplace, but nothing concrete linked him to Sarah. His phone records were clean, and his whereabouts during the time Sarah went missing couldn't be verified. Despite the unsettling nature of his calls to Sarah, the evidence was circumstantial at best. As the investigation progressed, the family's hope dwindled. The search had expanded far beyond what anyone could have imagined. But still, no Sarah, no answers, no closure. I just wanted something to tell me where she was. Anything. A sign. Something to tell me she was still out there. But there was nothing. Months had passed since Sarah Green's disappearance. Each day without answers weighed heavily on her family and the investigators working the case. Despite exhaustive efforts, the trail had gone cold, and the mystery surrounding her disappearance seemed to deepen with every passing hour. But just when it seemed like the investigation was nearing a dead end, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. On the morning of June 12, 2019, a local farmer made a chilling discovery. As he worked his fields, he stumbled upon something that would change everything. The farmer had been walking his land when he noticed a strange sight, an abandoned bag near the tree line. He approached cautiously, his curiosity piqued. But as he got closer, the chilling realization hit him: this wasn't just an abandoned bag. It was evidence. The police were called immediately, and within hours, investigators were on the scene. They secured the area and began their search, with canine units and forensic teams scouring the land. What they found next was nothing short of terrifying. Hidden among the underbrush, partially buried, were the remains of a woman. As the body was carefully removed from the site, forensic specialists confirmed what they had feared: these were the remains of Sarah Green. Detective Michael Adams was the first to hear the news. He was still reeling from the months of fruitless leads and dead ends when the call came in. It's hard to describe what it feels like to get that call. It was a mix of relief and heartbreak. We finally had a breakthrough, but the outcome wasn't what we'd hoped. Finding Sarah's body was devastating for everyone involved in the case. The discovery of Sarah's body, although a major development in the case, raised even more questions. There were no obvious signs of foul play, no physical trauma, no injuries, no clear indication of how she had died. The forensic team worked tirelessly to piece together the details of Sarah's death. The preliminary autopsy report was perplexing. There were no external injuries, no signs of struggle. The body was remarkably well preserved, which indicated it had not been exposed to the elements for long. The cause of death was inconclusive at first. There were no blunt force injuries, no gunshot wounds, no stabbing. Sarah's death seemed to be a mystery in itself, but something was off. We knew it wasn't just an accident or a natural cause. As the investigation continued, one of the most surprising findings came from the toxicology report. While no obvious injuries were found on Sarah's body, there were traces of drugs in her system, drugs that hadn't been prescribed to her. The drugs found in her system weren't common. They weren't recreational drugs like cocaine or heroin. Instead, they were sedative substances that could render a person unconscious, making them easy to control. Investigators began to believe that Sarah had been drugged before she was left in the wooded area. But who had drugged her, and why? These questions only deepened the mystery. More disturbing evidence was discovered nearby, a discarded note, partially hidden beneath a pile of leaves. The note was cryptic, written in a hurried, almost frantic hand. It read, "I'm sorry, but this had to happen." When we found that note, it threw us off. It was clear that someone had been involved in Sarah's death, but the message didn't make sense. Who wrote it, and why? It was a clue, but it didn't give us the answers we needed. To find any meaningful connection, the police ran handwriting analysis on the note, but no matches came up. It was as if the note was written by someone who had taken precautions to remain anonymous. For Sarah's family, the discovery of her body was bittersweet. They finally had the closure they needed, but the grief of knowing Sarah was gone forever was overwhelming. I had hoped every day that she would come home, that she'd walk through that door. But this isn't how I imagined it. I wanted her back, not to find her like this. While the family mourned, the investigation carried on. The discovery of Sarah's body didn't close the case. In fact, it only opened up new questions, each more haunting than the last. The discovery of Sarah's body made it clear to us that someone had planned this. The drugs, the note, the way she was left there, it all pointed to the fact that Sarah wasn't just a random victim. She had been targeted. Though they had found Sarah, the investigation was far from over. The question of who was behind her disappearance and death loomed larger than ever. With the discovery of Sarah Green's body and the unsettling clues surrounding her death, the investigation entered its most crucial phase. But despite all the evidence, the mystery remained. The questions that had plagued Sarah's family and the investigators were now sharper than ever. Who was responsible for her death? And why was she taken in such a brutal and calculated manner? Detective Adams and his team began piecing together the puzzle, but as they dug deeper, they found themselves confronted by a chilling truth. There were multiple potential theories, but none of them provided clear answers. The more we looked into the case, the more questions we had. It was as though we were being led down several different paths, all of which seemed plausible but none of which could lead us to a definitive answer. The first theory that emerged was that Sarah had been targeted by a stranger. Someone with a sinister agenda, who had taken advantage of her vulnerability. But there was a problem with this theory. Sarah had no history of being involved with anyone who could have posed a threat. Her friends and family confirmed that Sarah lived a peaceful life. She had no enemies, no indication of any danger. She wasn't involved in risky activities or unhealthy relationships that might have made her a target. She was just a regular person. She was friendly, outgoing, but she didn't have anyone in her life who would hurt her. I just can't wrap my mind around it. Who would want to do this to her? The second theory centered on Roger Ford, the man who had rented the house near the industrial park. The connection was clear. Sarah had called him just hours before she disappeared, but Ford denied any involvement. His alibi seemed flimsy, and his past behavior raised suspicions. I didn't know her. I never saw her. I don't know why she would call me. I was out of town when this all happened. I had nothing to do with it. Ford's criminal record wasn't substantial, but it was enough to raise doubts. A history of petty crimes, vandalism, and one assault charge years earlier were red flags for the investigators. But the evidence against him was circumstantial. His alibi, though weak, couldn't be disproven. We looked at Ford extensively. We thought he might have been involved, but we couldn't connect him to Sarah's death in a way that would hold up in court. At the end of the day, we just didn't have the proof we needed. The third theory centered around Sarah's toxicology report. Traces of sedatives found in her system indicated that she had been drugged before being left in the wooded area. But who had administered the drugs? And why? Once we knew Sarah had been drugged, it added another layer of complexity to the case. The sedatives weren't something you'd typically find in a regular prescription. They were powerful enough to knock someone unconscious, but didn't leave obvious signs of force. Experts confirmed that the sedatives found in Sarah's system were strong enough to incapacitate her. But still, the question remained who would have the motive to drug Sarah and leave her in such a vulnerable state. Despite all these theories, no one theory seemed to fit the pieces of the puzzle perfectly, and as the investigation went on, another possibility began to emerge. Could Sarah's death have been the result of something more personal? I keep asking myself why. Why would someone do this to my daughter? We just want to know the truth. We need to understand what happened. Who could do something like this to Sarah? The breakthrough came when Detective Adams revisited the evidence with fresh eyes. He began to look at the case from a different perspective, not just as a missing persons case that had gone wrong, but as a carefully orchestrated crime. The note, found near Sarah's body, became a key piece of evidence. It seemed to suggest guilt. The rushed, apologetic tone of the note made it clear that someone was trying to cover their tracks, but it also hinted at a deep remorse. Whoever wrote it had been involved, but perhaps not without regret. Handwriting analysis of the note failed to produce any matches, but it revealed something significant. The writer had intentionally made an effort to hide their identity. It was clear that the person who wrote the note knew Sarah, but was trying to conceal their connection to her. The investigation started to point towards someone from Sarah's past, an old acquaintance who had recently re-entered her life. This person had been in touch with Sarah in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. Someone who had a motive but had kept their relationship with Sarah hidden. In the end, after months of investigation, a suspect was identified. But the case remained complicated, with more questions than answers. Was it a crime of passion? Or was Sarah's death the result of something darker, something far more calculated? While the search for justice continued, Sarah's family struggled to find peace. The truth was elusive, and the case remained open, with more theories than conclusions. We'll never stop looking for the answers. No matter what, we just want to know who did this to her and why. The search for the truth never truly ends. For Sarah's family, justice is still a distant hope, a hope that one day, the person responsible for her death will be held accountable. Until then, they continue to live with the uncertainty, clinging to the memories of the bright, vibrant woman Sarah was. Nearly 2 years have passed since Sarah Green's disappearance, and the case remains unresolved. For her family, the pain of not knowing who was responsible for her death is unbearable. They continue to hold on to the hope that one day, they will find the truth. I can't let go of the hope that one day we'll know what happened. Sarah deserves that. She deserves justice, and we deserve to know why this happened to her. We won't stop looking. Detective Michael Adams continues to investigate, still piecing together the clues in search of closure. The case has been one of the toughest he's worked on, but he is determined to find the truth. For Sarah, for her family. Every case you work on leaves an impression, but Sarah's case, it stays with you. There are pieces we still don't have, and that's frustrating. But as long as there's a chance to solve it, we keep going. The community of Maplewood, once shaken by Sarah's disappearance, has come together in her memory. Every year, they hold a vigil to keep her spirit alive, a way of showing that Sarah hasn't been forgotten. Her friends, her family, and even strangers who were touched by her story continue to show up, hoping for answers. It feels like she's still here sometimes, you know? I keep thinking we'll get the call, that someone will come forward with the information we need, but it hasn't happened yet. Though the investigation may have slowed, the desire for justice hasn't faded. For Sarah's family and for those who loved her, the search for answers continues. The mystery of Sarah Green's death is far from closed. The case remains open, and the truth is still out there. Detective Adams and his team are still working on leads, following every clue, hoping that one day, they will bring the case to a close. But with every passing day, the question remains who took Sarah Green, and why. We just want to know. We just want to know what happened to her. She was our daughter, our sister, our friend. We'll never stop searching for the truth. The case of Sarah Green may remain unsolved, but her story lives on in the hearts of those who loved her. And until the truth is uncovered, they'll continue to fight for justice for Sarah. If you have any information regarding the disappearance and death of Sarah Green, please contact the local authorities. Every tip, no matter how small, can make a difference. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more stories that demand to be heard.